Alright, so you guys really wanted my thoughts on this episode, so here it is. Hi and welcome to Ranger Rants. Of course, everyone knows I'm Archer9234. Today I'll be discussing Once a Ranger, the 15th anniversary episode for Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. Once a Ranger is Power Rangers' 15th anniversary celebration episode, which is also similar to what they did in Bokenger. Instead of Super Sentai's was the 30th anniversary episode for Super Sentai. This episode actually does not use any footage from Bokenger. It's not adapted from any team-up or any other footage from the Super Sentai series at all, excluding stock shots from the Mercury Rangers finisher move and the Megazord fight. This is an original episode specifically made for Power Rangers only. Overall, I did like this episode. I didn't mind that they created this new character called Thrax. Rita and Zed had a son. I kind of could forgive him how he's an adult now because he's an alien. He could have aged much more faster, or some other thing could have been talked about, like a spell or something that could have made him age faster. So I don't mind Thrax as a character. He's all right filling in for Rita and Lord Zed, because you couldn't really have Rita and Lord Zed in the episode because Rita was turned good and Zed was turned good. The episode begins basically with the blue team trying to find the other jewels for the Corona Aurora. The Overdrive team attacks and stops them and brings the jewel back to the museum. Thrax invites all the main villains from Operation Overdrive and basically makes them team up, which they should have done in the beginning. This is kind of like a little thing that I never liked about this episode, because why didn't the villains team up prior to this episode? So basically Thrax finally introduces himself, gives a basic explanation of who he is. I did like the nod to the dumpster because the Sentinel Knight sealed him into the exact same dumpster as Rita was sealed in the beginning of the series, and the first time she was resealed back into the dumpster. I did like that. And he was also trapped on the moon too. They all team up. They actually stop the Rangers, and Thrax somehow magically knows how to disconnect the Rangers from the morphing grid. Okay, I'm glad they brought back some Power Rangers continuity into the series, because the morphing grid was some very important thing back in the Zordon era, where Zordon Alpha and Billy were always talking about it, so they did bring it back. However, I didn't like how Thrax knew how to break into it and disrupt it. If he could do it, why can't they do it any other time in the past or future series? And why only disconnect those specific Rangers? It kind of like, you always have to ask that question, like, why couldn't he do this? Why couldn't he do that? I particularly did not like the morphing grid design. I understand it's called morphing grid, but it looked like a big weird tunnel that's from underground. So I wish they didn't physically show it, because it would never look good no matter what they would have thought of. And then Alpha going into it, so it's like, okay, so people could physically go into the morphing grid even though it's made of energy. So after Thrax disconnects the Overdrive team's morphers to the morphing grid, 5 original Rangers from past series come back and save the day. We have Adam from MMPR Season 2, we have Kira from Dino Thunder, Tori from Ninja Storm, Xander from Mystic Force, and Bridge from s.p.d, although in the future from s.p.d. Personally, I love the cast that they picked. I enjoyed all 5 of them from all the past seasons. Those were one of my favorite actors for each of the seasons. So I'm glad they chose it. What I didn't like, though, is that they should have had a 6th Ranger in the team so that Taizan wasn't alone. It's really noticeable when they're doing that end scene where they're giving back their morphers to the team. They abruptly cut away before Taizan receives his. Who would give Taizan his? The Sentinel Knight? It didn't feel right. Because we have 6 Rangers and then the other team is only 5. There should have been a 6th Ranger from any of the seasons. It could have been Zane, it could have been Mike, it could have been Eric, it could have been someone from the 6th Ranger team from that point. There was one line of dialogue I didn't like at all. When the Sentinel Knights saved the Rangers before they got killed by Thrax when they lost their powers, he said, "The jewels were unprotected, I need to do something." That line implied that the Sentinel Knight knew where the jewels were. And that always bothered me to no end. It's like, if he knew where the jewels were, why didn't he tell the other Rangers where they were and just got them? So after the Rangers appear, they temporarily substitute for the Overdrive team. They also control their Zords temporarily and have access to whatever weaponry they're still able to use. I really didn't like, though, is that how they intercut between the music for each of the past team members. It was alright in the first time they did it, but they kept doing it over and over again, and it felt really weird because it was just simply jump cutting between each team's opening theme song. It didn't feel right in the episode. The worst thing, though, is Adam's theme. It was not the original MMPR theme. I guess Disney was too cheap to pay for the rights for the song. I mean, would it really have been that expensive to pay for that song? I mean, Disney at that point did own all of PR. It should have been at least cheaper to simply just license the song again. I mean, you have to pay everyone who worked on the song, but I mean, it should have been not that expensive. So it really did screw up that moment where Adam was finally revealed, and we had this generic, stupid song for him. Speaking of Adam, I also like to point out the MMPR Black Ranger suit was slightly modified for this episode. Overall, you won't notice the slight details they did change to it, but there are certain things they did change to this new version of the suit. First and foremost, they did include the proper Power Morpher buckle. It does say Power Rangers on the suit, so at least that's corrected instead of saying Jew Rangers like they did back in the earlier days. One noticeable difference is that the belt clasp for the white belt around his waist. The back of it, you were always able to see the connecting clasp on the back in MMPR and the Jew Ranger footage. And once a Ranger, that was blocked off by an extra piece covering around it. Another change is the helmet. The MMPR helmets always have a clasp on both sides so you can disconnect them. They alter the helmet for Once a Ranger where the clasps were either missing completely or one was only visible. Another change was the Blade Blaster. Unfortunately, they most likely didn't have access to the original Jew Ranger Ranger Stick prop like they did back in Season 3 where they were actually using the Ranger Stick prop from Jew Rangers. So they were actually using the BOA toy because you can clearly see it's a different incorrect scale from the holster to the front end part. Especially in the scene when they're all in the underground base where Adam is demorphed with the without his helmet. You clearly see that the Blade Blaster is way too small for that holder. Another cool moment from the episode is when Alpha returned. I mean, when Alpha came back, I thought, oh great, we're getting Alpha. It's a cool nod to past episodes, but it did bring up some continuity issues between Once a Ranger and the last time we saw Alpha 6. The first thing I'm going to complain about is how did Alpha get back from Miranoi? He would have to travel through the wormhole from Miranoi back to Earth. I mean, you could, I guess a fan could always link it to, well, Bulk came back from Miranoi to come back in a samurai, so Alpha 6 could have came with him when he came back. You could have linked it that way. Okay, fine, but why was Alpha inside a box? I understand Alpha was like tired or exhausted from all this stupid adventures and going crazy for many years, so I'm like, okay, he wanted to shut himself down for a break. Why are you in a box? Why wouldn't you want to meet up with an older past ranger that you do know, who you do trust, and shut down yourself inside their home, their basement, or go back to the ruins of the old command center back from Turbo? They're probably still there. You could have either repaired some things and then shut yourself down. The best moment, I think, in the entire two-parter episode was when they were getting Alpha out of the storage place. We got all these key moments where we're seeing the past Rangers fight. Although I didn't like it, though, that we clearly see that the later actors couldn't actually do most of their stunts. While Adam sticks out his sore thumb, and he's doing every single stunt imaginable, doing all these crazy spin kicks and all these slow motion shots. That's what I didn't like about the later seasons of PR, where we have decent to good actors for PR, but they can't fight. So after they find Alpha, Alpha goes back to the underground base and repairs the morphing grid and restores the Overdrive team's powers. Great, good and all. And we also get the introduction to how they use Zubon from Bokanger into Operation Overdrive. He's basically just the Sentinel Knight modified into a sword. Okay, that's a decent way to use the Zubon footage into Overdrive by using the Sentinel Knight that way. It was a good idea, but I do have to complain about one thing. Alpha's voice. Was it so hard for them to hire either Alpha 5's voice actor or Alpha 6's voice actor for this episode? Would it have been that hard, that expensive? It could have been either Alpha, it could have been 5 or 6, because they're two different characters. One could have came back to Earth, one could have stayed at Miranoi, or Alpha 6 came back from Miranoi, and that would have been it. It would have been perfectly fine, either Alpha 5 or 6. You would have just had to choose which suit to use. I was like, if you're going to bring an old cast member back, try to get their voice actor or the original actor themselves. Don't do it halfway and then stop. So after Alpha finished repairing the Rangers' powers, they all duke it out between Thrax and the 6 main villains teams from Overdrive. Mainly the fights were all fun and enjoyable. I did like all the action and stuff, but thanks to them not having a 6th Ranger for the team, Taizan was weirdly alone and fighting it solo. That's the reason why I wish they had the 6th Ranger, because he didn't have anyone to fight with. He was all alone, and it was weird. He was an afterthought in the entire episode. I'm like, Taizan is an important character to the Overdrive team, but he was always treated like an afterthought. Especially when they were doing the montage scene where we were finding out what the Will, Rose, Mac were all doing after they lost their powers. Taizan was just walking around in a field. What's that? We get no story from this character whatsoever. He's just there. And I really don't like that when a 6th Ranger is just there on the team for just help and they have no personality whatsoever. So at the end of the episode, Thrax is finally killed by the team's group gunshot, where everyone shoots off all their finishers and guns and weapons. I didn't like though that while everyone shot off their attacks and stuff that they used throughout the series, Adam just simply puts his hand on Mac's shoulder and uses energy through Mac. Did the writers and the producers and the editors and everyone who works on the show forget that the Power Axe has a blaster mode? He should have been firing the blaster mode on the Power Axe instead of him just holding on to Mac's shoulder. I thought that was a little bit stupid. Everyone else was shooting something off except for him. So we get this fun little moment at the end with Bridge dealing with his buttery nonsense again, which is funny, but they overdo it every now and then. And we have all these fun little moments and references from past series, basically Kira talking about her band and her music, while Tori is running the custom store where she always worked with Zane and Dustin. They're still working there, and we hear Xander still is working at the Rock Emporium, so we know they still have their lives and they're still dealing with the regular issues which I thought was really good because, well, they're still real characters, so I'm glad they do reference this. And we also find out that Alpha now goes with Adam, and then he actually runs a dojo. So we actually do get a little bit of back info from Adam's past that we didn't know about since he graduated from college and left from Turbo. Overall, I give the episode like a 4 out of 5, only because of the guest cast, not because of the Overdrive cast, because the guest cast was all enjoyable. The Overdrive cast, it was decent to annoying at many points in the episode. Mac was alright. Mac, Dax, they were alright. Rose gets on your nerves because, again, she's being the pushy person on the team and trying to be the know-it-all. Will, again, is being the snarky idiot who's always like, I'm perfect, I'm good, and I'm the cool one. And then, again, Ronnie is there but doesn't do anything, and Taizan, again, doesn't do anything either. So, I didn't like in the episode. The thing I hate the most about the recent PR episodes, and I'm glad I stopped it in Samurai, are the overuse of the explosions and the overuse of the slow-mo shots. Every time they do an explosion shot, there's always that stupid repeat of the slow-motion junk. It's very annoying in a regular episode, but in this one in particular, they were doing it constantly. There were literally 3 sections, all 3 major fights. Lost Power, Team Up, and Finale, all of them had all these slow motion shots. They're very annoying and distracting. They're trying to make it look cool, and then half the time they're not because they're annoying. So I didn't like that aspect of that part of the episode. But I did overall like all the other nods to MMPR where Adam had to say more phenomenal. Everyone always says more phenomenal in these anniversaries. So it's cheesy, but it's still fun to hear. What do you guys think personally for this episode? Did you think it was amazing, oh my god, because of the guest cast? Or I know there are people out there who do like Operation Overdrive, but personally I do not, and many other people don't either. And you can see why it had many flaws and it had issues during the run of the season. It used too little of stuff, it tried to be cool, but at the same time it screwed up. Thanks again for watching. Leave some suggestions of future episodes I'll do. Pick other episodes that you would like me to discuss. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you right back here next week.